Greetings, microscopists. This is Eric Miller reporting from M&M 2025 in Salt Lake City, Utah. I had a great time in the blistering heat of the Salt Flats. If anyone went outside for more than 45 seconds, they needed to liberally apply burn cream directly to their eyeballs. Of course, it was a dry heat, which we were all thankful for, the same way we were thankful for all the salt water we had to quench our parched and bleeding throats. The doctors say the internal organs of mine that did shut down have all started back up again, and I guess I'm just going to have to believe them because I still feel dead inside. But actually, Salt Lake City was pretty nice, and no one got stabbed, except me by my irritable bowel syndrome, but that's a story for another time. We'll find out next year if M&M in Milwaukee is similarly casualty-free. Now for this year, I did take a bunch of man-on-the-street type interviews, and I'll be posting those as I post my other vendor interview videos in the coming weeks. For now, we're going to talk about all of the exciting things I saw and learned about this year at M&M. The likelihood is high that I will accidentally misstate something in this video, so please, I invite everyone to mercilessly berate and correct me in the comments if you spot something that is totally wrong. The talks this year, I literally burned every calorie I've eaten in the past month walking the show floor and talking to people there, and spent the rest of the time passed out in my hotel bed, which is just a fancy way of saying I didn't make it to any of the talks. However, I can say that 4D STEM remains the dominant hot topic. There were lots of talks about it, there were lots of people just walking around talking about it, and there were a number of new products on the show floor designed for it. Tychography, spelled with a P, was a topic I heard mentioned a few times. I'm not terribly familiar with it, but it sounds like it would be a fascinating technique if it started to really become a big thing. Tell us in the comments what you thought the big topics were this year. Stickers! I handed out stickers to a ton of people, and they're ending up in all sorts of fantastic places like water bottles and laptops and phones. This is just my simple way of telling you I have a merch store open at redbubble.com where you can get t-shirts in all sizes, styles, and colors with my own handmade electron microscope theme designs on them. But wait! There's more! We've got stickers, mousepads, bags, even clocks with more designs and products to come in the near future. Just check out the merch page at Instructinate.com to become the coolest person in your lab today. I'd like to get a quick rundown on what all the major microscope manufacturers were up to at the show this year. We'll be going in alphabetical order. Sorry, Zeiss. SICTech, we can now call a major vendor here in the US since they don't sell just tabletop SEMs. They are selling full-size tungsten and Schottky SEMs through JH Technologies in California. SICTech had a small booth with only a very small 3D printed mock-up of one of their instruments, so there wasn't much to see. They weren't interested in talking to me for an interview this year, but JH Technologies did, so stay tuned for that. JH Technologies also distributes for COSEM microscopes from South Korea, and they had an EM40 tabletop and the full-sized CX300 tungsten system in their booth. Hitachi seemed uncharacteristically to be the big player on the show floor this year, not with the size or super coolness of their booth, but with the sheer number of instruments they had everywhere. You could barely turn a corner without running into a Hitachi microscope. In their booth, they had an SU8700 Ultra High Resolution Schottky SEM, an SU3900 Plus Very Large Chamber Schottky SEM, and an R-Blade 5000 ion mill, all of which was fairly standard. But on the rest of the show floor, they had a TM4000 tabletop in the Mega booth doing educational outreach, another one in the Angstrom Scientific booth, and another one in the Oxford booth. There was also a tungsten-sourced SU3900 in the Bruker booth, an HT7800 TEM at the AMT booth, and a Schottky SU3900 Plus in the Oxford booth. It looks like there was a Hitachi spill on aisle everything. Joel had the same basic setup they had last year with a still fairly new JEM 120i TEM, the JSM IT810 Ultra High Resolution Schottky SEM, the JSM IT710 Schottky SEM, and a Neoscope Tabletop SEM. Tescan had a completely redesigned booth this year with new branding on it. The branding was so bland and completely different than their previous branding, people told me they kept walking past it looking for the Tescan booth, but they couldn't find it. Can you find it in this image? The booth was about 1/3 or 1/4 the size of their booth from last year. They brought no instruments and instead had 2 remote demo stations running. Thermo Fisher had the same small-ish sized booth from last year, but with one huge change. They actually brought instruments this year. They had 1 room for remote demos, but 2, count them, 2 real functioning instruments in their booth. They had the new version of the Aprio ChemiSem and the new Sios 3 FibSem. I can't verify this, but it's maybe possible someone from Thermo saw my video last year where I reported that some conference goers were not happy about flying all the way across the country to do a remote demo on the show floor when they could have had the exact same experience sitting at home in bed. Maybe that had something to do with their change up this year. I don't know. Can't prove it. Zeiss, like Tescan, had a conspicuously downsized booth this year, but kept their 2 remote viewing stations and did not put any instruments into their booth. They did, however, have a Sigma 300 VP SEM in Oxford's booth. A question you might have is, why are all these instruments from Microscope Vendor A in Accessory Vendor B's booth? Well, as I mentioned in my video last year, it is incredibly expensive to move these instruments around the country just for a trade show like this. Think like $50,000 per instrument, something on that order. So accessory vendors who want to show off their products will sometimes partner with a microscope vendor to split the costs on shipping and installation of these instruments. In return, the microscope vendor will be able to run demos on their instruments that are in someone else's booth. You might ask why a certain accessory vendor partners up with a particular microscope vendor. That is a more difficult question to answer because it could be due to many different things. It might be due to certain vendors being easier to work with than others for whatever reason. It might be due to the vendor preferring a certain model of microscope to show off their system on. Or it could be some third reason I don't have the imagination to come up with right now. So here is something weird that I saw this year that I thought I would bring up because I think it's interesting. There were 2 vendors there with products that shocked me a little bit. Quantum Design has the Fusion Scope, which is a big AFM with an SEM bolted on top of it, and Simplor, which is a new manufacturer of tabletop SEMs, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Well, both of these companies have built their own EDS systems to put on their own instruments. So why is that completely mental? And why would anyone want to do it? Let's start off by talking about what makes up an EDS system. First off, you have the detectors. Detectors are not that difficult to build for anyone, though high performance and reliability are a little bit trickier to achieve. However, in the case of these 2 companies, we're looking at basically 2 tabletop SEMs, and the performance needs are not particularly high. The next part is the analyzer, which is the magic number crunching box that always seems to be losing communication with everything all the time. This is what takes all the data from the detector and turns it into something useful. This is likely the most difficult part of building an EDS system. Lastly, of course, we have the software. This is also a bit difficult and time-consuming to make as is any big piece of software that has to maintain constant communication with multiple other pieces of equipment. So with all of these difficulties to overcome, and with Oxford, EDAX, Bruker, Thermo Fisher, all with EDS systems to sell and ready to go out of the box, why would any company take on the task of making their own system? Oddly enough, the answer I've heard is cost and integration. First, we'll look at cost. Now, I don't know exactly what Quantum Design or Simplor did to make their systems, so this is a bit of guesswork on my part. They certainly did make their own software. They might or might not have made their own detectors, but it is my guess that they did not build their own analyzers. Basically, by purchasing analyzers and possibly detectors from one of these big-name EDS companies, they can add it to their system at a lower cost than buying that company's complete branded system directly from them. Of course, making your own software means you can fully integrate the EDS system into the SEM's GUI, which is really, really nice. Right now, Thermo Fisher is the only company that sells their own EDS systems on their microscopes. All of the other companies that do fully integrated EDS systems buy the detectors and analyzers from another vendor and then integrates it with their own software. Hitachi is the odd vendor out in that game because while they do make EDS detectors, they aren't sold to go onto electron microscopes. They go into for some other industry, something or other. I don't know. The software and integration that Hitachi has, though, is specifically only with branded Oxford products. Anyway, I just thought it was fascinating that these companies with these somewhat smaller products were going through the trouble of making their own EDS systems, or at least their own fully integrated software. Okay, I didn't speak with everyone, I didn't see everything, but I did see a lot of it, and I just want to briefly go over a few of the new things I did see that I thought were interesting. This video is unsponsored, and I am not endorsing or recommending any of these products, just bringing them to your attention. So in no particular order, we start with COSEM. They had a software upgrade for their tabletop and full-size SEMs that would allow the user to generate a surface reconstruction live in the GUI. Yes, that means that you can move the stage around and the software will automatically update a 3D surface reconstruction of your sample using the directional BSE detector. Now, I've done a lot of 3D reconstruction work in the past, and I thought this idea was super cool. And if you watched my video on 3D reconstructions, you know that the directional BSE method is great, but requires Z-height calibration. Otherwise, those Z numbers are just awful. The version of the software that COSEM was showing off was not finalized, and they told me that they were working on a method to calibrate the Z data, which would be great. I have an interview with them, so subscribe to make sure you see it when it comes out. Next up, a new company, Luxor, had the most fascinating innovation in sputter coaters I've seen in probably forever. In their design, the samples are mounted upside down on the lid, while the sputter target sits at the bottom. If anyone has ever had to deal with sputter coaters, you know that the target in the lid and all the insulated parts up there are usually kind of a big pain to deal with. And it's very fiddly, wires get frayed, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I have an interview with these guys coming out, and while I can't say whether these are worth buying from a cost or performance standpoint, from a design and engineering standpoint, I would say that these things are beautiful. They claim that with the target having to sputter up, larger particles never make it to the sample, making their coating much finer than you would normally get on a normal sputter coater. Anyway, they have carbon, gold, platinum models available. I don't know how they are price-wise compared to the 500 other sputter coaters already on the market, but these might be worth taking a look at if you're in the market for such a thing. AutoCube has a new multi-mode instrument this year called the Microscope, which is an AFM with nano FTIR, confocal Raman, and normal FTIR LDIR. This allows the user to do chemical analysis of their sample on both the optical and nano scale, and it just seemed like kind of a neat idea. I have an interview with them, but this instrument is so new, I can't find it on their website at the time of filming this, so maybe it will be there by the time the interview drops? Semplor is a new Dutch company attempting to enter the US market with their tabletop SEM. Now, there are already approximately 18,000 other tabletop SEMs on the market, but this one seems to hold some promise. This is an entirely new design by a group of designers and engineers who previously worked at Phenom to develop that line of large tabletop SEMs. This instrument is brand new, and I haven't used it, so I can't say too much about it. I just think that due to its pedigree, it might be worth taking a look at. Interview to come soon. Insight Chips has some very interesting looking liquid flow-through chips for in-situ TEM testing, from which they claim they could adjust the thickness of the liquid layer to meet your particle size and analytical needs. The thinnest they say they could get a liquid layer was 5 nanometers, and had some data showing atomic resolution of particles in liquid, which was pretty interesting. I filmed an interview with them, but due to some technical issues, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to show it. So we'll see what happens in the future. LC is a German company making super gigantic chamber SEMs. I mean, these are pretty interesting if you have the very niche need of doing SEM, EDS, and EBSD on something humongous. This is a tungsten-based system wherein the column moves around inside the chamber rather than the stage being capable of moving around a 500 kilogram sample. While there is a very small market for something like this, but I mean, if you need it, wow, you really need it. I have an interview with them, so stay tuned. Data management and sharing has been a bit of an issue in the electron microscope space for a while now, but with the advent of 4D STEM and the mass quantities of data it spits out, there were a number of companies on the show floor this year advertising cloud data and data management services and products. I thought that was kind of interesting that this need is so great now that so many companies want to get in on the electron microscope data action. I have an interview coming up with 2 of these companies, so we'll see that when it comes out. Oxford did something interesting that I think will be of benefit to the community. If you've ever tried to get reasonable quantification numbers from the lighter elements, like carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, you'll know that that is an exercise in futility. I don't think I've ever seen an EDS system that quantifies those elements particularly well. Perhaps because most EDS systems are calibrated around manganese or maybe copper. Oxford has now added a carbon calibration to their systems, which should make quantification of those lighter elements much better. We will see in the future how this does. I didn't go big on the merch this year, but I got a couple of things. The biggest and best thing that I saw being given out this year were these t-shirts from Dectris. So yes, I got one. These water bottles we got this year were much nicer and are greatly improved by an electron microscope themed sticker available at Instructinate.com. Bruker was also giving out a bunch of pretty cool and funny Star Trek and sci-fi themed stickers. I picked up this one. I also got this little magnifier which says microscopy on it. I have no idea where it came from though. Sorry to whoever was giving these out. And if you didn't go to the Quantum Design booth and pick up one of these amazing cookies, then I just don't know what to tell you. Anyway, that's all I've got from M&M this year, except the approximately 20 interviews that will be coming out in the following weeks. Thank you very much for watching. Check out Instructinate.com not only for super awesome merch, but also updates on all the new products coming out in the world of electron microscopy. Stay tuned, and I'll see you guys around the lab.